Watercolor and botanical paintings. Let's take a stroll around a garden and close our eyes. Feel the gentle breeze. Take a whiff of the aromatic and fragrant scents of blooming flowers and the earthly fragrance of dew-kissed grass. The chirping of birds creates a melodious symphony as they flit from tree to tree, embracing the new day with tunes. Slowly, let ourselves immerse in the atmospheric pleasure of nature. Flutter our eyes open and take a moment to indulge in the radiant colored petals, dispersed amongst the protruding greens. The indulging led to artistry in botanical illustrations, a valuable resource for studying and documenting plant biology. The Florida Art Education Association defines botanical illustrations as a scientific discipline, a subset of scientific illustration. Scientific botanical illustrations are created to accompany descriptive text such as journal articles, textbooks, field guides, where the image functions to provide information and educate the viewer. Its objective is to accurately represent the imperative attributes of the plant specimen, form, color, and size against a neutral colored background. Isolated against a one-colored background, they are not idealized or generic representations of plants and flowers, but illustrations that have the individuality of portraits. Complete with blemishes and imperfections, these almost tactile illustrations were intended to be admired not only for their scientific accuracy but also for their beauty. The illustrations were an integral facet of botany in the Renaissance era. The Renaissance saw a burgeoning fascination in the cultivation and representation of florals as scientific inquiry and as subjects of beauty. A known botanical artist of the era was French Jacques de Morgues. Moyne's naturalistic collection of flower paintings coalesced precise observation with artistic sophistication developed from his probable early training as an illuminator. His watercolors follow in this vein, capturing the true-to-life details of aromatic florals with exquisite color harmonies. The book, titled Color for Botanical Artists and Illustrators by Leigh and Gale, elaborates how color is fundamental in botanical illustrations to accurately identify floral species. Observation and recording of color at the initial stages of the illustration ensures that artists encapsulate the true likeness to the coloration of the flower subject matter when it is at its peak of its growth. The colorful compositions are produced by having comprehensive knowledge on the theory of color, such as color selection and mixing, and handling of their color medium like watercolor. Taking notice of subtle variations in color hue and shades on the morphology and anatomy of the plant is essential. Gale underlines that artists have to consider the placement of differently colored botanical elements, using dominant and receding colors to emphasize a sense of spatial depth within a painting, and how well the colors harmonize, balance, or contrast with each other in the composition. How the artist manipulates color contributes to the effectiveness of a botanical painting. For example, lifting thin lines of color to produce the fine network of venation on a leaf, producing the effect of reflective light, or the adding of yellow glazes to differentiate between the natural color variances in a green leaf. The paintings of the iris and a sheet of stadies of flowers, a rose, a heartsease, a sweet pea, a garden pea, and a lax-flowered orchid exemplifies the employing of watercolor to capture the naturalism of the florals. The iris is displayed in the Victoria and Albert Museum. The museum provides that it is one of the 59 botanical watercolors in Moyne's album dated around 1575. It is a painting of an iris green stalk with two blossoms, gray with blue standards, purple falls, and yellow beards. Irises bloom in early spring to early summer. Iris flowers have an unusual structure and appearance, as shown in the diagram from Schreiner's garden. The petals resemble a fleur-de-lis symbol, which is French for lily flower. It is a stylized emblem primarily used in ornamentation and in heraldry, as it is historically associated with the French crown. Some petals stand upright while others cascade down. Britannica describes the tall petals as standing like signal flags. The flowers have 3 sepals, 3 petals, and 3 broad pollen receptive stigma branches. Of the 6 petal-like floral segments in irises, the erect inner ones are called standards and the drooping outer ones are called falls. The parts are located above the ovary into a single pistil that consists of 3 carpels. The composition is dominated by its stalk. The the narrow stem that joins the leaves and flowers, making the spathe, covering the ovary, branch, and leaves visible for studying the biological components. The painting was illustrated with the medium of watercolor and gouache, a type of paint made from pigments bound in water-soluble gum, like watercolor, but with the addition of a white pigment to make it opaque, which enabled him to capture the true-to-life colors of the flower. Black chalk was utilized to draw the rough outline of the flower. Moyne conspicuously used bright paint of rich blues, yellows, and purples to freshen the petals. In Victoria and Albert's museums, Renaissance watercolor, materials and techniques featured on Smart History, the narrator explains that Moyne formulated the watercolor himself by grinding pigment and mixing it with powdered gum arabic, creating varying consistencies of the paint. On the flower, the hairy texture of the beard is apparent by the rough ground paint with large pigment particles. For every delicate brushstroke, it blends into a gradient of colors that enriches the texture of the 5 layers of fiber-like tissues. These tissues are very complex and reveal in various forms, such as thread-like and linen-like. The shading adds depth to the structure of the florals. Looking closely, there are thin, vivid brush lines of lighter colors for natural dimension. The narrator adds that the highlights on the plants are brightened with white opaque gouache or left unpainted. The iris in itself is harmonious. The blossom at the foremost point and on the left-hand side, with its 2 leaves on the right-hand side, create a balance. There's a slight triangular composition that is at ease with the eyes. Sheet of studies of flowers, a rose, a heartsease, a sweet pea, a garden pea, and a lax-flowered orchid is displayed in the Metropolitan Museum. The museum provided that its similarity in style to the set of 59 watercolors like the iris in Victoria and Albert Museum, which bears inscriptions in French and Latin, suggests that the painting dates from Moyne's French period. It is a composite of scientific studies in one beautiful illustration of 5 specimens that bloom in spring to summer and even into fall. Standing tall is the comprehensive, slender, lax-flowered orchid, the floral focal point. There are 2 narrow, pointed leaves arranged along the stalk. The first nature provides that the inflorescence is lax and carries magenta flowers whose erect lateral sepals are bent backwards and are so close to each other that they graze. A hood is formed by the dorsal sepal and the 2 upper petals. The flower lip is sharply folded lengthwise and has a pale, almost white center. From the petals to the branches, there is a flush of deep magenta gradually seeping into the plant. On the left-hand side, there is a rose and a garden pea, and on the right-hand side, there is a heartsease and a sweet pea. 2 flowers on each side of the orchid balances the composition. The protruding, luscious leaves of the garden pea takes on the space beneath the rose. The close proximity of the flowers, like how the petals of the rose and orchid slightly graze, and the leaves of the garden pea are behind the orchid stalk, do not hinder the studies of botanists of each floral due to the identifiable forms. The 4 flowers on each side are cut at the pedicel, a small stalk stemming the complete flower head. The orientation of the petals give visibility to the sepal, a green and leaf-like enclosure of the petals, and the receptacle, a region of the stalk to which floral parts are attached. Each flower is carefully described in vivid detail and using vibrant and varied colors of watercolor and gouache to capture its naturalism. The rose, orchid, and sweet pea share a similar magenta color palette with lighter hues to brighten and add luminosity. The heartsease is violet, blue, and yellow with hints of white. The garden pea is white with pinkish-purple veiny gradient, which radiates from the circular, dark inner petal. The layering of the translucent and opaque paints produces a delicate depth and outline of the florals and plant. With meticulous brushstrokes, Moyne conveyed the textures of the petals as silky, almost light to the touch, rose thorns as prickly with the plentiful prickles, and rigid stems detailed with lines. He was attentive to the fine detailing and texturing of the petal veins to portray a lifelike study sheet. Unlike previous illustrations in natural scientific books, where viewers might see the flowers spread out and categorized into different types of floral specimens, separated on different pages, he assembles a natural environment that seems to be unfolding before their eyes. Instead of lifeless specimens, it is full of life in the ambiance of nature. The iris and a sheet of studies of flowers, a rose, a heartsease, a sweet pea, a garden pea, and a lax-flowered orchid paintings depicted a profusion of scientific floral details. the compelling naturalism and a dynamic composition is an indicator to the floral's innovative fusion of science and art. Naturalism is inherent in the botanical illustrations to depict and represent the color, character, and detail of a plant, identifiable to that specimen. It must have scientific accuracy, portraying the floral with precision and level of detail for it to be recognized and distinguished from other species. The book titled The Beauty of the Flower by Stephen A. Harris concerns that viewers who are unfamiliar with botanical illustrations functioning as resources of study may overlook these paintings to be decorative and market works. Instead, it is an illustration that serves scientific purpose, to record, display, and convey scientific data about plants. An effective botanical illustration need not to be merely exquisite, but it must be accurate. Watercolor is a diverse medium ideal for a botanical illustration, as it facilitates a lightness of treatment for the subject and a delicacy in portraying lifelike characteristics to document and understand the diverse and colorful world. Given a side-by-side comparison of each flower illustration and his photograph, it demonstrates that the artist can highlight beyond the capacity of a camera, reflecting certain characteristics that have a greater relevance in some groups than others. The Oakland Museum's and Educator's Guide to Botanical Illustration conveys that details that may be valued to the botanist can be obscured by other parts of the flower, or more prominent features may divert attention from more subtle features the botanist primarily focuses on. An illustrator is able to work around these complications with more ease than a photographer. Photography cannot bring each characteristic detail of a flower to life, whereas an artist can hone in on the way a leaf is attached to a stem, the formation of the sepals, or concealed features beyond the photo. Additionally, interpretations of a photograph may change over time, but as accurately observed and recorded data, botanical illustrations are timeless scientific records. The evolution of and interplay between botanical illustration and scientific ideas are rich, complex, and nuanced. The work of artists and botanists alike is modulated by the times, places, and circumstances in which they work. It seems that no enhanced photographic technology and digital revolution could satisfy to a remarkable extent the scientific requirement of the botanist. Thus, botanical illustration is an essential means of plant identification and is regarded as an invaluable scientific tool. Botanical illustration is still a vital part of scientific discovery today, and is key in the dissemination of knowledge about plants. Art engages, attracts, and unifies viewers, raises plant awareness and appreciation, and builds consensus in the urgency of preserving the natural world. In seeking to represent a plant in a way that was both naturalistically accurate and beautiful, Moyne was emblematic of his time. He served as an influential artist on botanical illustrators in early history, as appraised in the British Museum Quarterly section of the journal An Album of Plant Drawings by Jacques de Morgues by Paul Hulton. He held that nothing is known of the watercolor school that trained Moyne, but it is no coincidence that nearly all his surviving work is botanical.